So here are the questions.
So I wanted to get a feel for what you all knew about young adults, who we are, and some of the terms that we use a lot in our congregations when talking about young adults. So I wanted to ask a couple questions, and so we're going to make this participatory and physical. So my first question, and if this is a yes answer, please stand up, and I'll give a couple seconds for that, and then I'll ask you to sit down. And then if it's a no answer, I'm also going to ask you to stand up, and then we'll take a couple seconds, look around the room, and then I'll ask you to sit down. Do you know the difference between youth and young adults? If yes, please stand up. Okay, awesome. Please sit.
You're expecting an awful lot of physical activity from us old people. There's one difference. Sorry.
Sure, yep. Okay, so in my work that I do with youth and young adults, more on the young adult side, I notice that I say, oh, well, I have my young adult group meeting tonight at 7 o'clock on Sunday, and members of the older generations look at me and say, oh, you have your youth group tonight. And there's a distinct difference between youth and young adults. Yes, ma'am.
I think that question has a different answer in different contexts. In publishing, young adult seems to be 13 or 14, or maybe even 12.
Yes, ma'am.
So you need to know the context and know what the ages are in a given context.
Yes, ma'am.
And in our Unitarian Universalist context, that's a great question. Generally speaking, youth is 13 to 19, so it's sort of that middle school, high school would be considered youth, and then on in the 19 to 34 is considered young adult. And that incorporates that emerging adult phase from 18 to 30.
Yep. And so, okay, so my next question, yes, I know we're going to be physical again. You can raise your hand if you don't feel like
Yes.
standing up. Do you know any young adults?
Yay! Great.
Okay, awesome. If you don't know any young adults, it's possible that there are no young adults at your church, or that they, like we said before, they don't have strong connections to institutions. Young adults nowadays are doing church differently. We're doing church online. Church of the Larger Fellowship is an online-based church where young adults and other members of our congregations can sit at home in the comfort of their home and listen and take in a spiritual message and a sermon. And so we're doing churches differently today than we did in previous generations. If you also don't have young adults at your church, it's probably because we need a different time to do church. So we need to do church at night, or we need to do church on a Saturday. And this comes from a large age range, being both college students and first-time parents, needing a babysitter, needing time to incorporate classes and study and some downtime, and as well as a spiritual time that might not work on a Sunday. Okay, next question. Does your church have a young adult group?
We had a small group ministry for a while, group, but we don't have.
You're in Mount Vernon. Okay, so Mount Vernon has a group.
That's awesome.
I wouldn't say we really do now.
And
we do.
And you're in Germantown?
Germantown.
Okay.
Yeah, Germantown.
That's awesome.
I go to the Church of the Restoration, which is close to the Germantown Church. We are much smaller though.
Yep.
And we just don't have enough. We don't have enough active young adults to form a group.
We have, and I'll say this, we have a core group which really, ultimately, it consists of me and my wife. But I mean, we have sort of a core group. We've been kind of running things along, and people come in and out, kind of.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can we just stick on that for a minute, if you don't mind the attention?
No.
Was that group started by young
there was one before, but it fizzled, and so we kind of resurrected it. Unfortunately, it came from tragedy. We had a young adult who was at our church who passed away, and so we all kind of came together. And since then, we have. It's actually, to be honest, the only two people who would remember that young adult are me and my wife at this point.
Is that Kate?
Yeah. And so anyway, we've kind of just kept it going. We just keep activities going. We have a small group ministry that gets together, and it can be tough sometimes because sometimes it's me, her, and one other person.
Right.
Sometimes it's 20 of us. I mean, truly, it really depends.
Yep.
So how is that supported by the congregation at large, or is it?
We get a lot of smiles and great job. I mean,
It's a lot of affirmation.
It's good that there's definitely the affirmation there. We also are encouraged to run our own service once a year. And we try our best to not make it the Ben and Kelly show. We really try to get other people involved in it. But it's a challenge. I think one of the biggest challenges that our church faces is its location, because a lot of young adults in our area do not have cars. We have one car between the two of us. That's all we really can afford. And there just isn't that good of public transportation to the church.
Where is this?
It's in Alexandria, Virginia, but it's
Oh, yeah.
pretty far south. Like it's
Yeah.
near to Mount Vernon. So the bus doesn't really run very much on Sundays,
Yeah.
and you have to walk up this huge hill.
Yeah.
And so that's been, and a lot of people in our area use public transportation.
Yeah.
I've actually theorized that I wish we could get a van going that would take us from the metro, or at least like have people trade off, because we end up being the van in our Honda Fit, and schlepping people to and from the metro. And people are like, oh, why don't you organize that? And I'm like, great, but you know.
In Philadelphia, we have a fairly good public transit system. It's not terribly good on Sunday.
Yeah.
So it's difficult. People traveling distances, there could be long waits for the bus.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of have some answers to these questions, but I'm going to make my last two questions into one and just ask that, do young adults take up leadership roles in your church, and if so, in what way?
We just, oh, somebody else?
Oh, no, you can.
No, we just had the most incredibly successful event at our church last night that was spearheaded by a 23-year-old. And I just go to school on the way he publicized it, the way he made it happen, the way he got the adults to do stuff, the other adults to do stuff. Now, it is a mother-son team, and a lot of our young leaders are kids that have come back because they couldn't get a job in New York,
Right.
whose parents are still active in the church. A lot of them are leaders in the youth group. So,
Yes.
In Germantown, we have some leadership roles occupied by young adults. My perception of it, I'm sort of just on the other end of being a young adult now, but it's more one or two here or there who are
right.
exceptional, who are breaking through on things. There's not a system to get them doing that. It really relies on this
Intentional
one
system.
person who's so talented that they can do wonderful things with it.
Right.
It's not the rule, it's very much the exception.
I agree. I think, and I will say, anytime that we've tried to step up and do things, they're very like, oh yes, absolutely, we'll have you on that team. But, for someone who's very self-motivated like myself, that's easy to do. But getting others involved in leadership positions who may not be as self-motivated but may have something to offer, and we've done our best to try to get some of those people involved, but it's us pulling you back. Yeah.
I have in our congregation a young adult who is leading one of the fellowship or covenant groups. So she went through the training to lead that. And it's not specifically a young adult group. She's leading all ages on that. And that's the only one that I know of right now who's in a leadership position.
We do have a young adult associate minister. That's a really good thing.
That's cool. Yes, sir.
I speak as a member of the silent generation. I think there is a general tendency in our churches for the boomers, more or less, to dominate and constitute the board and hold positions of leadership. And it's kind of a natural thing because they've been around for quite a while they're not yet at the point where they want to drop out, and they have a lot of experience and so on. And sometimes they're just in the custom of they need something done, they ask another boomer. They don't think of asking a younger person.
I actually wanted, if I could piggyback, you said that an associate minister who's a young adult. It's interesting because I only found Unitarian Universalism because I was a paid tenor section leader at a church in Hartford, Connecticut. So it was money that brought me to the church initially, and then I decided it was something I really felt strongly about and wanted to stick with. So that's, I think, maybe an issue.
What kind of building of money brought you to the church? I mean, one of the things that strikes me here, I understand why they want to do church online, but on the other hand, if you're having trouble getting your first meaningful job, what better place to go and network and display your leadership skills in person with people who might have job openings than in a church environment? It's kind of a shame that we don't have a tactful way of making that point with younger folks, as it could be real opportunities for them.
Yes. Well, I think, and one of the things, in that demographic is that younger adults just don't think that way. They, the vast majority of our nation is unchurched. We may be a secular Christian, secular Jew, but roughly 16% of Americans attend church on a regular basis. So there's a lot of people out there, many of whom are young adults, who don't know what church is all about, who don't really understand what the purpose of the institution is and what it can offer, what can it do for me, and so it's complicated because I think there's a societal, there's that weak connection to institutions, and that breaking down of institutions that Kimberly was talking about as well. So why do I want to hitch my wagon to something that's a dinosaur and it's on its way out? And that's a question I think a lot of young adults may be asking themselves. I see some head shakes.